Hi folks, I'm Ken Zerker from Zerker Amplification, and I either teach class or straighten out camera shots. I either teach guitar classes or I do electronics work because I build amplifiers and still teach. So let's look what showed up on my doorstep today. Yes, indeed, this is a 1965 Deluxe Reverb in totally original shape, I think. I know that nobody's really been in here. There's a 2-wire cable on this. I was asked to evaluate it and probably make it work for a good friend at a local music store. I don't normally do a lot of repairs, but these things are always fun. So let's plug it in and you and I can find out together what it doesn't do. I've cheated and I plugged it in at the store, but I want you to see it. So hang on here. So let's see. Both these are down. Power's on. No, it doesn't blow fuses. This is one of the finest examples of these I've ever seen. So we may have hit the holy grail. Comes with the original foot switch and the cable. Let me turn it on and see what we hear. Well, that sounds like a 60 cycle hum because it's low frequency and it buzzes really well and really loud. So I'm going to stop this segment and you can come along with me on the repair. Well, here you are, folks. This is a completely unmolested, never been touched inside Deluxe Reverb from 65, I'm thinking. We'll check that out more carefully. The date code is in the cabinet here. Look at this. This is how it was wired in the real days, long time ago. Compared to now, I remember it because I was around at that point. But here you are. Here is the inside guts. And most of this can be left here. If you look, these things here, those are what they call cathode bypass capacitors for the preamp tubes. Those need to be replaced. I would bet lots of money on these blue devices here are also capacitors, and those rarely go bad, okay? Those are considered part of the sound of the amp. And if you give me a moment, I'll turn it over and we'll see that that hum is likely to have come from the filter caps that are on the other side. Then I have to contact the owner and make sure he wants it fixed, which I'm quite sure he does. Hello, while we're waiting, here is the tube chart in here. Doesn't have the date in regular code, but you'll see it is the AB763 circuit, the most famous one. And down here in the corner, you'll see it says QA. And if you look that up, which I will, it should be 1965 or 1966. On the internet, the real chart is available. I personally have not memorized it, and if you're wondering, I do have one of these devices. I have a 60s Fender Deluxe Reverb that belonged to my wife's family before we got married. But here is the original Fender speaker. I'm sure that's, if we find the date code on there, that is an original. There's something here. 465 634. I'm thinking it's from April of 1965, if you look right there. But I'll figure it out. This is either a Jensen or an Oxford with a ceramic magnet. I would bet that it's an Oxford, to be honest, because Jensen's almost always said, Jensen special design. And this one just says Fender Musical Instrument Special Design Speaker, but it doesn't say Jensen on it. So mine had an Oxford in it, and this one does too. These are really old caps. We'll check the values of these dropping resistors here. And they're both 10,000 ohms. Brown, black, yellow, or orange is 1, 0, and then 3. So that's 10,000. That's 10,000. And it should be somewhere near that when we measure it with a nice digital meter. And I just happen to have a fluke here. By a fluke, I have a fluke. So piece by piece, we're going through this. Well, okay. I just talked to my friend at the music store who got me to assess and perhaps repair this. And he agrees with me that these filter caps need to be replaced. No 60-year-old filter caps will function more than a few minutes. And this one, with that hum that you heard in the first segment of this, knows that. So I'm going to dust off the aluminum oxide or whatever that powder is. Hopefully didn't work in a talcum factory. And change these 5 caps. I just happen to have some new ones from CE Distributors. They're called Mod brand caps. I'll show them to you. Oh, I'll do it now. Let me go get them out of my collection of parts here. And they might be these, or they might be the next ones. These are 40s, wrong size. I think these are the 16s. These are 16 and 475. The only thing wrong, I would say, with these, although it's going to clean me out, I'll have to get some more. The only thing wrong with those is they run, and it's not wrong, the different is they run a slightly higher voltage. There, see, it's 16 and 475 volts. But look at the difference in size. Modern caps are a fraction of the size of the old ones, and they have lower equivalent series resistance, it says, and that means they run cooler, and you don't, they last a long time. So we'll put these in, and we'll test it. You and I will test it together. Well, there you are. 5 nice new little capacitors. Oops, that one's a little pushed over. There we are. We'll straighten these out exactly as best as I can, because I wouldn't want the next guy to look in there and go, that guy before me was sloppy. I'm being silly, but those fit in there beautifully. Those are modern capacitors. They have to be aimed the right direction. See, these all say plus on this end. These are the positive supply. These down here are all the grounds. All Fender amps don't work that way. Some of them, they put these 2 capacitors in series, or is it these 2? I forget if I flip it around. And that way you get better high voltage for amps with higher voltage, because it's hard to get 600 volt versions of these. And it was always that difficult to get 600. So the new caps are in. I'm going to cover it up. And I did test these resistors. That one's about 11K and that one is 10.6, so they're well within what I would call a tolerable range. I got most of the aluminum oxide off of this thing. I don't recommend using a paintbrush like I did, because it was a little tough on my nostrils, so I'm not going to do that ever again. And I'm going to cover that up, look on the other side for the bias supply cap. Okay, well, I have this turned over and hooked up. I ran an extension cord here down to the speaker in the cabinet, and I will be using that as a test. And this, you'll see, is a light bulb limiter, and what it does is if you are using tube equipment and there's a short in it, instead of causing all kinds of damage and wreaking havoc, all it does is turn the light on full blast. So we're going to turn the power on here, and you'll see the light lights up a little bit there, see, and then it cools down as the filaments do their little initial flash. Okay, and the moment of truth is coming up. We'll see if the hum goes away, and I'm pretty confident that it will. So hang on, I'm flipping the switch. All right, that's moderate brightness. Let's go over and listen for hum. I've got my dryer on, so it isn't helping much. It's quiet as a church mouse. All right, now it's time for tone. All right, so my guess is that I did succeed in repairing this. I hope you're as excited about this as I am. This is my little Fostex tone oscillator. It's been through World War III and back, and after numerous repairs, it still works. It's just going to produce a tone that is music to my ears, but not necessarily to everybody else's. And we'll turn it on. Switch the switch down. Doesn't even clunk. Let's see if I get some tone out of this. Should be about 1 kilohertz, 400 hertz. Well, does that sound like music? Sounds like music to my ears. And despite the fact that I've got the dryer running here, this is a multi-purpose shop. It is a laundry and a clothes place. This thing is pretty much working as it's supposed to. I'm going to try it with the light out of the circuit so I can plug the amp directly in. And hang on here. There we go. I'm sorry, one of these days if I do more of these, I'll buy myself a real camera, although it probably won't have better pictures than my phone does. All right, power on. And we'll do a little test with the oscilloscope over here and see if we can measure how much power comes out of this. Theoretically, it's 22 volts, or 22 watts. And we'll see how that happens. All right, should be warmed up. Tone is off, amp is on. Nice robust 400 hertz tone. All right, give me a moment. I'll hook up the scope with a dummy load, and no, it's not me as the dummy load, but we'll hook up the scope and we'll measure whether we have. Yeah, I can do it over here. What kind of power we have coming out of this thing, and we can look to see if there's any hum. You can often see the hum. And some of my friends are probably laughing at me right now because of the work. You know, they do this every day. And while I'm okay at repairing these things, my highest quality work is generally in making new ones, building new amps. No, I don't build Fender Deluxe Reverbs, but I build things that give us nice sounds. At least I like to think so. All right, here is an oscilloscope. Now, because they have running at different frame rates, you're going to see some funny looking. See, I'm seeing it's going over boom, 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 and you're seeing these slow movements. But I will turn the tone on here and see what we get. Well, I have a famous line I always have told my students, that it works better when you turn it on. I had turned this off to make the changes in it, not turned it back on. So here we are. I'm going to pop this thing over looking at the scope, and hopefully you'll be able to see it as well as I can here. See, it's starting to go up in a fashion. Let's turn it up until it starts to clip. Well, I need to change this then because it hasn't. And we'll turn it a little further and further. Holy smokes, this is working just beautifully. And let's see how far. Right there, see? You see where the top edges of those waveforms are starting to flatten out? Well, I back it off until it's just right there. Okay, and that's at the point where it's going to clip. Let's measure that spot. And that is how many? That's 10, 20, 30, that's 38, 39 volts. I'm going to do the calculations here. I'll be right back. Well, okay, I'm going to turn this on. I'll show you how we measure it. All right, each of these little lines on the scope, if I do this right, yeah, will give me about, come on you, there we go, loose lip sync ships, I guess. All right, so we're kind of near 40 volts. It's 10, 20, 30, 40. I've got, let's say, 38 volts. 39, it doesn't, see if it likes me here. Yeah, see, that's about 38, 39 volts from the top of this to the bottom of that. That's called peak to peak. All right, now let's make the calculation. All right, so I've got this world's oldest calculator here, and you put 39 volts in. All right, and then divide that by 2. And that gives me 19.5 volts, and that's peak, which is half of that waveform, okay? And then you have to square that, so you hit the X square button, and I get 380.25 something or others, doesn't matter. And then you divide it by the load. And this is a single speaker, so it's 8 ohms, and so I divide by 8, and I get 47 watts. Somebody did something wrong here. Let's try that again. All right, 38 divided by 2 equals 19. Well, that's close enough. That's average. Oh, you have to do that times 0.707. And that is, actually it's a square root of 2. It gives you the RMS value. This is the actual real watts you're going to get out of this thing at the point where the waveform clips. That's the distortion point. All right, now if I remember where I am in the calculation here, we'll get you there. It's 13.433 volts RMS. So let's square that. And I got 180, and then we'll divide that by 8 ohms, which is the speaker, and I get 22.5 watts, which is precisely what's supposed to come out of this thing. You know, it's at 22.555, -6, whatever. It's this thing gets 22 watts. Deluxe reverbs are reputed to do that. They are designed to do that. You see these nice little lights in the tube there? Those are the filaments. Those are the 6V6s, and these are all very vintage. Just beautiful tubes. All right, now this is an absolutely beautiful waveform. It's actually slightly clipped. Let's back that off slightly. You notice it's round at the top and round at the bottom. And it's producing 22 watts that we just honestly proved. And so I'm going to call the owner and say, we has repaired this said device. I will bring it back and hold it for ransom until I get paid. No, I'm joking, because he's a good friend and he'll probably pay me before I show up. So, all right, thank you all. And I've just repaired a vintage deluxe reverb with a minimum amount of parts. I'm not even going to change the power cord, although theoretically I really should, and remove the ground switch, and that'll be a little more safer. But this is a collector's item. I doubt this is going to see too many gigs. However, it is always a good idea to make these things work. And if you can see my shirt, you can see it says Zerker Amplification. So I'm proud of the shirt. And thank you for coming along with me. This is 12, 15 minutes, I guess. So I will hopefully do this again. Let me show you one other thing that's coming up. It's in the other side of my room. I'm going to turn the camera around. And there's the box. I'll put it back together as we walk through my basement. Here is an amp I'm building for me. That is a 25 watt, about the same as that, but it's got a more of a Vox preamp in it. Here's one of the regular 25 watts that I'm going to touch up the wiring in that, and my favorite Weber speakers. Here's a 50 watt, beautiful thing, and no L6s in it. This is going to be a 50 watt version of a red amp, which has the Fender or the American type sound. And here's my next repair. I don't do too many repairs, but when somebody brings me a nice vintage item that needs repair. Well, this thing is a Ampeg B15, and it's a bass amp, and a good friend of mine from Toledo has this, and he was practicing through it, left it on for a few hours, and smoke started coming out of there. And since that's probably frowned upon, I think it's time for me to repair it. This is from the 60s. My guess it has the original filter caps in it. There's a can here that has filters in it, and I may have to replace that. So stay tuned. If provoked, I will probably make a video of repairing that. Okay, here's a good demo of this beast. It's working perfectly, and it has been revived to the living after 64 years, something like that. Here you go. Nice reverb, listen. And if that's too much reverb for you, we'll turn it down a little. Not off. There's a little. That's the mellow side, and you gotta. It's a beaut. I think it will be for sale at my friend's store at Small Box Music, Toledo, Ohio. Actually, Maumee. If you get a chance, Maumee, Ohio, Small Box Music. Thanks to John for having me repair this for them. And we'll see you again, maybe with another repair, or certainly with a lesson.